Hi, I'm Femi OK. Today on the stream, I'm going to take you to a small area of jungle between Colombia and Panama. It is a small area of hell. Let me show you the map so we can push in towards it. We're heading towards the Darien Gap. So as we head in towards it, you'll see a patch of green, okay? That is the jungle. It's only about 60 miles wide, but getting through it as a migrant, this is part of the migrant trail from Central America through to North America. Getting through it is very difficult. Let me show you. Let's pull back and show you the long, long journey if you make it through that jungle all the way through to the United States. In the past year, more migrants have been traveling that route than ever. 107,000 migrants in 2021 so far. 19,000 of them were children. And another 50,000 are expected to go through that very same route before the end of this year. I know you have questions. This is part of the migrant story in North America and Central America that we don't always get to hear about. On YouTube, use the comment section, be part of today's show. We are asking about the Darien Gap, why it is so dangerous, who goes through there, and how does Central America solve or begin to address its major migrant crisis. On today's stream. Now I have three guests who will help us answer so many of those questions. Ugochi, Teresa, Hema, nice to have you here on the stream. Ugochi, introduce yourself to our international audience.
Thank you, Femi, and it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Ugochi Daniels, and I am the Deputy Director General for Operations at the UN International Organization for Migration.
So good to have you. Critical voice in today's program. Teresa, always good to have you on the stream. You bring stories, you bring insight, tell our audience who you are and your connection to the Darien Gap, because there's a piece of reporting that you've been doing that is has been very well received and so important.
Well, my name is Teresa Bo. I'm a Latin American correspondent for Al Jazeera, and I just came back from covering through the Darien Gap, and it was one of the most impressive, sad, and devastating stories I've covered.
Hema, good to have you here on the stream. Unfortunately, for a really difficult story to share with our international audience, but tell them who you are and what you do.
Thank you. I am Gemma Dominguez. I am the head of mission of MSF in Mexico and Panama.
All right, good to have you. I'm just thinking here about the Darien Gap and how I described it. Teresa, can you help me, because you were there not so long ago? How would you tell our audience what it is like for migrants to arrive at a town and know that they have to go through this jungle, and what happens to them in that jungle, and if they manage to make it out the other side?
Well, we arrived to the Colombian city of Necoclí, and once we were there, we started seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of people just piling there. They were not being allowed by the Colombian authorities to cross what is known as the Gulf of Urabá to continue with their journey towards Panama. People arriving there were desperate. Many have very little resources. They all want to make it either to Mexico or the United States as a final destination. They know that the trip is going to be difficult, but they never imagine, how difficult. Many of the people I spoke to in the beginning of that journey, they were telling me, we know it's very hard. But in the end of that journey, which is in a town of Bajo Chiquito in Panama, they said, had I known what I was going to go through, I would have never taken this journey. Me personally, we were not allowed to cross at the time. Security conditions were not, it was extremely dangerous for us to do so. But we did cover a big part of the trail through Panama, through Colombia, and then all the other side from Panama. And, people arrived to the other side hungry. Women have been raped. Children are dehydrated, ill, and many died along the way. So it's a very, very, very difficult journey for them to embark on.
I couldn't agree more. I was in Baja Chiquito just last week. I saw a lot of the same thing. I think what really struck me as you see the migrants walking into Baja Chiquito coming out of the jungle, how tired, disoriented they are, and the looks on their faces. And I had the chance to speak with quite a few of them. And something that really struck me was, first of all, they all talked about how this is nothing like what they expected. That's the first thing. But they all talked about the faces that they saw because they passed through so many corpses along the way. So they're also in a state of almost psychological shock when they arrive. And almost all of them also talked about how if they could, they would go back home.
Gucci, who's making this journey? I showed the map earlier, so we're between Colombia and Panama. So who are these migrants who dare to go through a jungle and potential death? They're not all going to make it.
So we saw migrants, people from Haiti, people from Venezuela, people from Dominican Republic, people from as far away as Uzbekistan, Angola, Guinea. So it's a range of people from different countries. But the other thing that really struck me is that they're young. Because to survive the journey, you have to be young and able-bodied. Many of them talked about their parents who were with them, but who died or injured and still in the forest. So that's what we see, a range of nationalities, but young people.
I'm going to explore that, the young people who are making this journey. Hema, the Médecins Sans Frontières did a documentary. They talked to some of the people who had made it through the Darien Gap, and you'll see how young they are and the kind of risks that they took. Let's take a look.
La muchacha se resbaló y cayó por el precipicio y wow, me dio un dolor en el corazón de no poder hacer nada. Y las demás personas vieron, gritaron, pero siguieron. Seguimos subiendo y llegamos al río. El sitio más peligroso que yo he visto es el río.
Hay un que le dicen, creo que 3 cruces, que fue horrible porque teníamos que cruzar y en el cruce se llevó a 2 haitianas a la otra orilla del río. La arrastró el río. Y una vez que cruzamos, que subimos la montaña, que bajamos, me dice mi amigo cubano, eso es una niña. Y pasó una niña, cada vez de una niña haitiana por delante de nosotros. Toda la noche soñando con...
Hema, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, what kind of state did you find people in after they'd gone through the Darien Gap?
I mean, well, the numbers are mentioning that this year is a big number of people crossing the Darien Gap. For us, we have seen more than 30,000 people in our consultations. We are present in Bajo Chiquito and in the migration station since April. It was an emergency for us because many migrants in Mexico, in the health centers where we are providing health care, they were mentioning the nightmare that was crossing the Darien. So finally, we did an exploratory mission in March, and in April, we were already operating the health center in Bajo Chiquito and supporting as well with health care in two migratory stations in Lajas Blancas and in San Vicente. In Bajo Chiquito is the first place where people are arriving, and as some of the other collaborators were mentioning, there is a mix. In one hand, there is all the health problems related to walk during 5 to 7 days. Nowadays, there is a last traject that they can do in canoe, but before they were 5 to 7 days. More and more, since many months, we see that they are families. So that means that there is the couple, sometimes adults a little bit old, and others that are a little bit younger, but they are with the children, sometimes adolescents, sometimes minors non-accompanied. And what they are mentioning is that at the beginning they go in groups, but there is one moment, as we see the images, that people, they lost their companions, and finally they are a little bit just in a hurry to continue and advancing. And finally, many people, they just leave their relatives. and they have to continue. So at the same time, the worst is the sexual violence and the violence that they experiment, because there are groups of, different groups that they are they rob the migrants, sometimes with a lot of violence, and at the same time, they separate the women and they rape them. So this is what as well we are observing and attending in our health center together with the Ministry of Health in Bajo Chiquito.
Yes, and we are equally concerned about the cases of GBV and what's especially
gender-based
violence, rape, sexual violence. But what's even more concerning is that we know that many of these cases are underreported. They don't want to report because they want to spend as minimal time as possible and just pass. And Femi, at the beginning, you were mentioning the numbers, 100,000 and possibly 150,000. It's important to also highlight that the numbers that have passed through this year is more than have passed through in the past 10 years combined.
Why?
Well, what we are seeing from our programs is that one is the impact of COVID, economic
people lost their jobs. They actually got no money.
Yes, and when you speak to them, they all say we're looking for better opportunities for our family.
Teresa, go ahead.
My experience is when we were talking to them and people were completely traumatized, as the documentary from Doctors Without Borders talked. I mean, women they did not want to talk about what happened to them, but then, we went to, not on camera, of course, and they were explaining to us how, they were going in groups and then they were separated, and then criminal groups with face covered. They didn't know whether they were Colombians or Panamanians, because that's an area that's important to know. That's an area where the Gulf, there's paramilitary groups operate in that area, Colombian paramilitary groups. But then there's criminal organizations on the other side. So the migrants, they pay some either coyotes or guides, as they call them. They're charging about $100 each. So they're told that they're going to be taken to the other side. But what happens is that once they arrive to the middle of that trip, they are either abandoned or they're kidnapped in a way by other groups, and then they're separated. And that's when women are taken to one side. And I was told that, for example,
Teresa,
prettier women were taken to one side. Yeah.
So, excuse me for interrupting you. I want to show some of the reporting, some of the people that you spoke to, because it's so powerful when you hear it from their own voices. So this is some of Teresa's reporting for Al Jazeera in the field. Let's take a look.
Flor says they were assaulted. A woman from her group was raped, and she had to cover herself in mud to protect herself. NGOs say rape has become the norm.
Y yo digo, a mí no me harían nada porque yo venía embarrada, me había caído por muchas lomas, yo venía full de barro. Agarramos barro y nos empezamos a echar barro en el cuerpo. Vamos a echarnos barro en el cuerpo. Para que no las miren, para que no nos miraran. Porque si nos veían sucia, ellos no buscaban tocarlo ni nada. Y nos echábamos barro en el cuerpo para que ellos no nos miraran.
O sea, el miedo de que las violaran era algo que era permanente, o sea, que sabían que podía pasar.
Nosotros sabíamos que podía pasar, era lo más lógico. Lo que pasa es que cuando nos arrinconaron en un sitio, por lo menos yo tocaba el piso, me buscaba llenar las manos de barro y me las pasaba en el cuerpo.
So, Teresa, you were saying that some women were being targeted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, they're targeted, and there's sexual violence, and there's criminal organizations that are operating in that area. And it's if you look at, for example, the conflict in Colombia, and so areas are completely out of control of authorities. There's no security in Panama. In some areas of the country, there's a similar situation, maybe not as serious as in Colombia. So there's no control. At a point, there were some talks between regional authorities to try to guarantee a safe path for migrants. But, for what I have heard, it's been, this is something that hasn't moved forward, and it's necessary. I mean, people crossing that border are victims to criminal organizations, to gangs operating in that area. Mostly women, our children, everyone I spoke to, and I'm talking, we spoke to dozens of women, everyone had been robbed. Everyone, they had lost all their belongings, their phones. So it's a very violent trail. It's a very, it leaves people traumatized. Many regret even embarking on that journey. But after all of this, that woman that we were just seeing, I spoke to her recently, and she's already in the United States. So, at a point she was asking me, please, let the voice out of what happened to us. But, she's now in the United States and asking for asylum. So people see that, and that's why they continue to go. And, just as, we were hearing is thousands and thousands of people continue to go there.
I'm going to bring in another voice into our conversation, guests, and then I have so many questions on YouTube for you. I'm going to ask you to maybe help our audience understand exactly what's going on from your perspective. Robert McKee Owen is from the Global Migration Centre. He's the Deputy Director, and he knows that this route through the Darien Gap, it's a very well-known route. If it's so well-known, the atrocities that happen to migrants is so well-known, what do you do about that? Here he is.
Fortunately, the Darien Gap is incredibly dangerous and has become a kind of a routine part of the migrant trail from people coming from South America through Central America. And the only solution I see would be for some organization to be there to meet migrants at the beginning of the gap in northern Colombia and take them through to one of the shelters that the Panamanian government hosts in central Panama. I don't know if that's really feasible, but it's become it's a routine part of migration for a lot of people, and a lot of people die passing through it, become seriously ill, become seriously traumatized.
Let's tackle some of the questions that you've been sharing with us, viewers. This is Carlos. He says the Darien region between Colombia and the Panama border has been a very dangerous place for refugees because of trafficking of drugs. Government should implement protection for those migrants. That's what Robert was saying, protection. Gucci, is that possible?
It's part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. We, as IOM, have been working with the government of Panama. They have increased patrols in the gap. We have seen at least the number of reported cases of sexual violence reduced, but we know that that is not enough to deal with the overall issue of migration. It needs to be a regional approach because there's so many countries in the region involved, but it also needs to be a range of things that need to be done. First of all, increasing regular opportunities for migration for these migrants, addressing the root causes and the drivers of migration where they come from, giving them opportunities to voluntarily return.
So you have the answers. Why? Look, we're surrounded in the studio by migrants going through hell. Right? So you have all the answers. Why are we still seeing it?
Well, at this point, there's cautious optimism because on the political side, the leaders of the countries involved are keen to address this issue. The UN Migration Agency, we've actually just put out an appeal for $75 million for a comprehensive regional response that will involve a range of UN agencies. So we know what to do, and the political will is there.
You know what to do. Is it being done? This is the Panama president. He's talking about this whole issue about if people are leaving because they don't have enough money, they don't have jobs. That could be the root cause. That is the root cause. Here he is speaking on October the 20th.
We have recommended a public investment program, a public infrastructure program to generate employment, a public infrastructure program to generate massive employment so that the people of Haiti, the Haitians, stay in their country so that they see progress and a future in Haiti.
Progreso, porvenir.
More YouTube comments and questions. Let me put this one to you, Teresa. Agba James asks, is there no way the migrants can get to their destination without going through the horrifying forest, the jungle?
Well, people, we have spoken to know that they have a path that they go through. They've been in touch with, their coyotes or guides before, and they know the way. I mean, this is something that should be, that authorities, regional authorities, should make a safe passage. While we were in McKee, for example, migrants were going to go one way, and then they ended up changing the trail. And that's the part that we filmed. They agreed it was kind of a very complex situation because you had the coyotes or guides that work with paramilitary groups, working together with the mayor of Acandí, a small town in Colombia, helping the migrants, through the way towards Panama. And they were trying to make sure that that was like a safe passage. What I found out is that when we met them on the other side, it was not a safe passage. People were robbed, they were harassed, children died, women were raped, and this is something that continues. I met with the foreign minister of Panama while we were in Panama also, and she wanted to create this safe passage. But the other thing that when we found out is that when we went to Bajo Chiquito, where Doctor Without Borders has a field hospital, they were the only ones working there. Migrants were not receiving any assistance from Panama while they were there. There were no food, they had nothing to drink, children were dehydrated, and the only ones helping them were Doctors Without Borders. So I think that much more needs to be done by regional governments because they kind of treat them as migrants. They won't invest in them. They just want them to keep them going. But what you have right now at the Darien Gap, what you have in Bajo Chiquito, is a humanitarian crisis that needs to be dealt with, local authorities. And local authorities, in many cases, either don't care or don't have the resources.
Gemma, I want you to talk about safe passage. I know you have some thoughts here, but may I play, first of all, Joshua Collins, and then when you finish listening to him, react immediately. Here he is.
What this really illustrates is that attempts to control and militarize these borders or prevent passage of migrants doesn't stop migration flow. It merely pushes these vulnerable communities into the hands of armed groups and criminal groups who control this passage. If people really want to try and make a humanitarian response to this problem, I think the only solution that I can see is to open some sort of humanitarian corridor that allows for safe passage.
Yeah, so it's exactly what MSF is advocating, a safety route where migrants or population in transit, they don't have to suffer the violence that they are experiencing in Darien Gap. I want to specify two things. One is that there are several routes. One of them that is a little bit more northern and you don't have to pass through Bajo Chiquito. You go directly from starting in Necoclí, goes through Capurganá, a little bit crossing Canal Membrillo, and you finished in San Vicente, in the migration station in San Vicente. That route is more expensive, and in that route, people doesn't experience the same violence. It's really very occasional. So there is one alternative, but it's much more expensive. In the south, there is the other route that is going out from Necoclí, goes as well Arcandí, cross all the jungle until Bajo Chiquito. As I said, the last 2 days, now there is a pirogue, so they economize 2 days. But this is the place where it is much more dangerous when it happens, all the violence. So I agree that there is some politics that can be solved in long term, but there is a need of a humanitarian response, not only from MSF, but other actors. And in Bajo Chiquito especially, as it was said, we are the only ones. Finally, Ministry of Health, they as well, they designated some health staff to be with us in the health center, but there is no other actor, and there are big needs. People are camping in any place. Now, under them, over the mat, there is no latrines, there are different bad conditions, hygiene conditions that really needs to be improved. Okay. And it's only, as I said, that we can work on this together with community and Senafron. So this is the first place that really now is urgent.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Gochi, for telling us about the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia. And it's where so many migrants have a fearful journey as they head towards the United States. Thanks for watching, everybody. Let me just recommend 2 things for you back here on my laptop. Pan American Gateway to Hope. That is Teresa Bowe's reporting. It is extremely informative. And also Médecins Sans Frontières, the Darien Gap, a dangerous, inhumane route. Thanks for watching. See you next time.